Well, greetings once again. We are on the fourth part of the study of Hinduism in this world religions class. Today, we're going to be talking about the gods and goddesses, some of the primary beliefs of Hinduism and life cycle as well. And then we'll end with an overview of the Hindu worldview. So let's get started and I will share the screen and we can get going. Okay. The gods, and we could add goddesses. Uh, Brahman manifests itself in three gods. So that universal spirit is only a reality with Atman, but the gods and goddesses are manifestations of it in some kind of form. Uh, the three gods that rise above all the pantheon of the gods are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. That trinity we saw at the very beginning of these lectures. Brahman, remember, is the creator of the visible things, but since his work is really done, there's no need really to worship him. On the other hand, what Brahma creates, Shiva destroys so that a new universe can be made. So there's that cycle of life, death, that it even occurs in the overall like that as well in the universe. So Shiva is the Lord of Destruction, but it's more of the destruction of evil. Vishnu is the Lord of Protection, and she has a lot of different avatars. And so Hindus, scholars say there's over 330 million different gods and goddesses. I don't know who had the job to count that, but that's quite a few. Many gods, and they go by a lot of different names. So sorting through them, it'd be an impossible job. And so we'll just hit the high points of the various gods and important gods and goddesses in Hinduism today. So if you look, you've got here, this one shows the Trinity, the three gods here, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Then all these gods have goddesses, Shaktis, that are associated with them. And so out of here, you've got various avatars that will be shown, and then there are particular schools that follow a particular god, like Vishnu. You will find out that among the avatars for Vishnu is Krishna, and so this school, Vaishnavita um, school, and over here Shiva, the Shavita school, and over here you got the Shakti school, Shaktis being the goddesses, and so you can know when a person follows Vishnu, they have a vertical mark on their forehead, and it's usually a certain color. And for Shiva, it's the horizontal mark across. And so you have these variations of this, and thanks to Cordovan for, and he put this in his book, Neighboring Faith, which is a good book looking at world religions from a Christian perspective. All right, well, each male god is associated with a female deity, his Shakti, it's called, which means source of power. So this overall energy that gives the male, strength is in throughout the mythology of Hinduism. Generally, the Shakti is a consort and sometimes broadly a wife. Goddess infuses the god with energy to do his work. Each god has a certain symbolic representation, and like a certain riding animal, he'll number of arms, which indicates power, or may have certain things in their hands, which certain gods or goddesses have carry certain things in their hands, and certain symbols represent them. So you got Brahma, the creator god. He's represented by 4 heads. Originally he had 5, but Shiva cut it off, and that's all part of the mythology revolving around these gods and goddesses. Um, you do see images in many of the temples of Brahma, but you don't see many temples just dedicated to Brahma. He's not a popular god for bhakti, the type of Hinduism that's devotion to a certain god. He just doesn't seem to be the one that they gravitate to. He does have a Shakti, Saravati, who is a popular goddess, and she receives a lot of veneration. Her representation is a musical instrument, a sitar over here. You can see a picture over here with the 4 arms and sitar there. And so that's Brahma. Vishnu, another one of the Trinity. People look to him for salvation. And they also oftentimes look at for one of his avatars. As we mentioned, he has a vertical line on the forehead when people are showing their worshiping, and they'll indicate that with that line on the forehead. Oftentimes when you go to a temple area where they may have multiple gods and goddesses in alcoves in each inside the temple, people are going in, and you'll see they'll have a mark on their forehead which indicates to tell you, which god or goddess they're going to be worshiping. He's known as the preserver. Emphasis is on chanting, dancing, and meditation. Recognized by having the 4 arms with a conch shell. You can see there in his hands. The lotus blossoms there. You can see that. The discus right over here, and then the mace right here. And so these are, these all are indicators of, this is Vishnu. The riding animal, in this case, a bird, or in some cases a snake. You can see here the bird like feathers, and then snakes kind of right up here. So you get all of them in this picture. And the color skin is bluish or gray. This one looks like it's a little more on the grayish side. So most concerned with maintaining dharma, the duty. So this God is saying you need to do your duty in your caste system, and born into the world as a heroic person, or oftentimes as an animal in their mythology, to put the world back on the right track, and then dies, then gets reincarnated again as some avatar. So that's Vishnu. You hear some avatars of Vishnu. So these, when Vishnu, everybody goes through the cycle. Gods go through the cycle of reincarnation as well, in various forms. They kind of veil rather than reveal the God within. But usually there's 10 avatars associated with the mythology of Vishnu. He was reincarnated as Matiza, the fish one. You can see the fish part down here. Kurma is the turtle over here. And I think it's turtle over here, yeah. And so riding on a turtle there. And but then there's all these others down here. And the most famous ones will be Rama and Krishna. And even they say Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, was a reincarnation from him. But we'll be making mention of Krishna and Rama for sure. So that's just an example of how some of these gods and goddesses have different avatars or reincarnated different things at different times. Rama, that one of those avatars of Vishnu, is portrayed in some heroic epic. It's called Ramayana. He has a wife named Sita, and who gets abducted by the demon king Ravana. He rescues his wife with some help from a friend, his brother Lakshmana, and the monkey god Hanuman help him out. He's usually portrayed with a long bow, which you can see here. There, color green is the dominant color oftentimes. Um, Rama Bhakti, that devotional aspect of Hinduism, is with Rama's love and grace to grant salvation. So, popular God there. And there's two schools that go with this called the baby monkey school and the cat school. The baby monkey school, if you visualize how baby monkeys cling to their mothers, that's different from a cat who has to pick up the baby kitten with her mouth and carry it. And so you get a lot of these type of pictures of how helpful Rama is to people, and he treats people kindly in love and grants them salvation. Krishna, probably one of the most famous of the avatars, and probably one of the most worshipped in Hinduism, is the eighth avatar of Vishnu. Extremely popular. Colors usually dark or bluish. Plays a flute, as oftentimes you see a flute involved. Usually seen with his wife Radha, and he appears in the writings of the Bhagavad Gita as a profound teacher. There's a lot of mythology surrounding him, and he's victorious over the demon king. Another view of him in the writings has him as a very mischievous, amorous wonder worker in folklore with amorous or even erotic adventures that go with him. Now, there was a movement in the 1970s called the Hare Krishna movement. These were people that were devoted to Krishna. There was a society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, or ISKCON, was formed out of the school of the Vaishnavati Bhakti school that we saw earlier in that overall chart. And Krishna is seen as a supreme form of a personal God. So Krishna in their movement gets put up to the point of that he's a one true God, and it's almost basically a monotheistic, I'll get it out, religion. It traces the source for this goes back to a 16th century teacher, Katyana. And the founder actually of this movement, if you can say his name, I'm glad for you, because I really don't even know how it should sound. But he popularized it in the U.S. in the 1960s at age 70, after he retired from being a pharmaceutical salesman. And it was very popular in the 70s, but now it's declined. But I can remember these guys very well. I was living in California and going to the University of California, and I would run into them around campus on going through town, and especially in the airports. They'd be in the airports and they'd be handing out their literature, and they'd have their earphones in, and they were little cassette players back then, and they would be listening to the chanting. And they would have to chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna over and over as part of their discipline. And so he was seen as supreme personal God. So salvation could be attained by chanting the mantra Hare Krishna. So the term mantra just means he's saying things over and over and over again. And supposed to say 1,000 times a day. They had special worship and with singing and dancing, and they believed that the Bhagavad Gita writings were inspired scripture. The devotees, these guys, and they dressed in those robes to distinguish themselves. They have to live a pure life devoted to Krishna. This meant abstaining from meat, caffeine, sweets, and sex for pleasure. And they were known, whenever I was around, they were always distributing literature regarding their religion. And they wanted to raise the consciousness of their message of Krishna as God. And so they came out. This is one of the movements that came out of the devotion to Krishna. Now you have Shiva, followed by most Bhakti Hindus, the highest god, very popular, called the destroyer, meaning the destroyer of evil. Right? In other words, can protect you from evil. The worship of Shiva is a little bit more austere than you might find like with Krishna. Can cause harm. In early days, she was connected with Rudra. And if somebody's worshiping Shiva, you'll see the horizontal line on the forehead called a tilaka. And that is, that's one of the ways they show who they're devoted to. There are self-inflicted extremes of devotion related to Shiva in various ways that he's worshipped. Represented in various ways, the phallic symbol called the lingam is often associated with him and often with the yoni or a vagina type representation as well. We're oftentimes seen riding a bull. The trident is a symbol that's often associated with him as well. Got some other gods here. Ganesha, which is one that you see often a picture of with the elephant head. He was the older son of Shiva and Parvati. And so notice you have God and goddess who have children. You can remember that in Islam, Muhammad was objecting to having the Trinity, but he would compare it to God and goddess having a son. That was very true of Hinduism, but not so of Christianity. But the myth is that Shiva severed the head, but after he calms down, he vows to replace the head, the first head, he replaced that head with the first head he sees. And he happened to see an elephant, so he cuts the head off the elephant, and that gets the son of Shiva and Parvati, Ganesha, why he has a elephant head. So that goes with the mythology coming out with these gods and goddesses. He's known as the remover of obstacles, like they used elephants in their culture to move things, carry things, and so that makes sense. So his followers seek him to overcome difficulties in life, in other words. And he's very learned in Hindu writings, and it's supposed to be very wise, as elephants are notoriously known for being very smart. Skanda is another one, the younger brother of Ganesha, god of war. So just notice the different types of gods associated with this, but you also have goddesses. And these are Shakti, or the goddesses. So you got Shaktiism. This is the worship of the various goddesses, where you, instead of worshiping a god, you can worship one of the goddesses. And two of the most popular are Durga and Kali. And, unfaithful consorts of Shiva. So they're depicted in the mythology as not being very faithful to the god. And there's oftentimes a lot of sexual motifs involved with them. Durga, this one over here, you can see the 10 arms. That's a lot of arms. That's an indication of a lot of power. And she's in a conquering pose here. You can see her, she's stepping on a lion and demon down here. Uh, One of the 10 arms holds a trident and other war implements. Oftentimes, given blood is part of the worship items devoted to her. Another one, Kali, is goddess of violence, and boy, this one she is an ugly looking thing. She's directed toward the evil and demons. She's black and gruesome looking. You can see up here, she's got skulls around, a necklace of skulls around her neck. Standing on here, you could be either standing on Tiger or Shiva's body, showing her power. Um, the belt down here is a belt of severed arms, and again, given blood in worship. Now, this one goddess has been associated with what's called Thagas, the cult Kali that practiced human sacrifices at one time. It was outlawed by the British when they were the colonizers of that area, but in practice, it didn't necessarily quit. I doubt it's very much practiced today, but always a possibility that these kind of cults sometimes hang around. There's another version called Tantrism. This is a type of sexual emulation. In other words, they have various sexual activities associated with the worship of this goddess. And so, again, you can see a lot of variation in Hindu worship of gods and goddesses and so forth. So now we'll look at some of the main elements of Hinduism's beliefs. One of the most important is the transmigration of the soul, called samsara. We say in English reincarnation. It literally means wandering, and it's this chains of infinite existence that holds the soul in this world, which means you can't really get out of this cycle of reincarnation. It's very difficult, and it's not a cycle that you really want to stay in. I know in US, New Age, they talk about, I had a previous life and, and the cycle, and it's looked as more of a positive thing, but really in Hinduism and particularly in Buddhism, it's not seen as positive. It's seen as something we should strive to get out of. But the problem is only the very devout can ever do that, depending on the system. If you're the bhakti system where it's devotion with the gods and goddesses, you're much more able to likely to get out of it that way than if you have to do it through the devotion, the actions like yoga and meditating yourself out of it. And that's the same as in what you find in Buddhism. And so, but this is a very important aspect of their belief system. An individual is transmigrated from one existence to another according to one's behavior, that is their karma, their merit. How did they have more good deeds than bad deeds? So if they had more good deeds, they would go up in the caste system, and so they would come back in another life in a better situation than they had left it before. But on the other hand, if they didn't do their dharma, their duties as well as they should, and so they lacked merit, they could go down in that. It's really not mentioned in the Vedas, and so it's possible that this idea of the transmigration of soul may have come from the indigenous people, but like I've said other times, we just don't have that much information on the indigenous people. And until they can decipher its language, it will probably be fairly limited in that. But it does seem to be important to the caste system, but it doesn't give a lot of hope because you're always just going through this cycle. And in the end, it's based on your works as far as where you are and when you come back, what you're reincarnated as. Um, it's generally looked as negative, like I mentioned a minute ago. And so karma, which is another word you need to be familiar with, is cause and effect. A person's life consists of actions, both good and bad, not necessarily looked at as sin or judgment. It's just, are you living, doing good things, or doing your duty that's supposed to do in your caste system? This symbol over here, called endless knots, this interlinking of cause and effect is representative of karma. And so the amount of merit or demerit to be worked off will determine one's next status in life, like we mentioned earlier. You could be a Brahmin going up the caste, or outcast down at the very bottom. A woman, a dog, a plant, a worm, eaten by a fish, who knows? But that is your karma determines that. Explains the differences. This system explains the difference between human life, and really, doing your duty is it's more of a purity system and very vertical, and you either go up or down this, and the more further up you go, the more pure you are considered, until you get to the top where you, at least on this world, you would be a Brahmin priest level, but you can go up into the demigods and gods and so forth. They're all connected in that system. Um, Good or bad health or poverty and riches are due to karma. There are basically four goals in life that Hinduism looks at. And so the first is that dharma, the duty, the law, the moral teachings that's in your caste. Now, notice this occurs within your caste. You don't do your duty of the duty of another caste. You just do what's obligated in your caste. And so you have to know your own social morality for that caste system. Ritual duties have to do with the worship and so forth. Uh, must know and practice to reach the rest of the goals set for your caste. And so it's associated a lot uh, with caste, but every caste has certain duties and things they have to adhere to, and to do that right. You have the artha, the material prosperity. So you can't really move into the other part of the goals of life unless you can do your dharma. If you're not doing your dharma, you won't reach the others. And this is shown a picture here. Well, I'll show it here in a second. The third would be kama, aesthetic pleasure, spiritual, intellectual, physical, and artistic pleasures in life. So you're no longer concerned with getting material prosperity, but you're more concerned with the aesthetic aspects of life, more spiritual, more intellectual, so forth, so on. And then fourth, moksha, the final liberation from samsara. But there's more to it than just that. There's some things we'll talk about later that have to be done to actually achieve moksha, that go with getting this release from it. And so if you look at this is an illustration somebody put together. Now you get your dharma now, and your duty, and down here you're making a living and having a family, and but kama, you're now getting towards retirement age, and you're more concerned with aesthetic things, more of a psychological value, as someone put here. And then during this stage, you're also looking towards how can you achieve moksha if it's possible. And again, most don't even try, but some do. but this liberation, we'll talk more about that as we go along. So the highest goal of Hinduism is to find release from samsara cycle, from the samsara cycle. Moksha means release from the actions and rebirth. And if you get that release, you will find nirvana, by knowledge of the supreme truth of the Brahma, Atman, the soul, Atman soul, Brahma, that world soul or universal power, is released from the cycle. So the Atman is what goes through the cycle of reincarnation, nothing else. And you got karma, which decides which way. So karma, Atman, are the Atman goes through that, and it comes out reincarnated at whatever level. Uh, to reach the point where you're released from that cycle is found by very few. And so you have this quote here: a river flows and disappears at last in ocean's water, name and form renouncing. So too the sage, released from name and form, is merged in the divine and ultimate existence. This is in Upanishad, which talks about the fact that, if you get the sage as someone who's managed to get out of this cycle of reincarnation by yoga, meditating, and so forth. And by that, his soul is merged, his Atman is merged into that big ocean of Brahman, and he just loses all personal existence, and just gets dissolved into that Brahman. So that is the highest goal of Hinduism. Let's talk about Hindu worship. Usually temples, a lot of them are dedicated to one god, but I was in one in Chicago where they had a temple building, and it had, in different alcoves, it had different gods and goddesses. There are images there, and people would come up and leave things in front of the image and uh, pray and chant in front of the image. And usually they put money or food items, which goes to the priests who maintain the temple. So you can have images of other gods in separate rooms or insets in the wall. Um, gods, it's considered, thought about it like this, that gods live in their statues. So statues must be washed and cared for. And while I was actually in the temple that time in Chicago, I actually saw them doing that. Um, they also have times of day of worship. A person can come in and worship anytime, really. And if you do, be sure to take your shoes off. And they have a place where you can put your shoes in a cubby. And but you should do that to show your respect. But they will go up to the god or goddess that they're going to worship, and they may have the mark on their head indicating that, and may leave the money there for the priests or food items, like I said, and they might chant something. I saw some people reading some things. Um, they have what we call temple services. It's a puja, devotional actions of worshiping a god or venerating even a human person. It can be, but while I was in temple one time, the procession, and they were carrying one of the gods on poles, and they were singing, and they had music and ringing bells, chanting as they did this procession. I don't remember now what actually the procession was actually about, but that's pretty common stuff in Hindu worship. You got daily worship, kind of depends on the caste, how that's done. The higher the caste, more likely the more uh, activities are involved, and because they have the means to do more things. High caste Hindu men pray 3 times a day, um, um, from sunrise on, and for sure, sunrise prayers are quite popular. Um, they can have households can worship together. They may have their, like these pictures indicate here, they seem are in a house, and so the they have their God they're worshiping image in there, and so they uh, they perform puja worship, and they there's a washing ritual, and they get dressed up, decorated, and they wash the image and decorate the image, uh, and and give it food at every meal, and so puja can be homage or showing respect to the deities. Um, and if it is done in the household, it's performed by the father of the household. The more wealthy families could have their own priest come in and do it. It's possible as well. The Code of Manu divides life into 4 stages, and these kind of go with going through that cycle that will lead to moksha as well, and that we saw earlier. The first is the first stage is student stage. This is when child's born, and then they grow up, and so there might be rituals associated with the birth, especially at the higher castes, not so much at lower castes. Uh, Rituals to protect the unborn from evil spirits, rituals to help the child to be a boy, uh, and things are there. It tends to be a society that values boys above girls. And you can read a lot of stuff in about Hinduism and its practice and daily life in Hinduism, and you will see that there is uh, a type of discrimination against females, and they're just male children are more valuable and highly valued in this culture. There's rituals for God to protect the child, and goddess Paraki is one of those. Um, a ritual for males of twice born caste. These are the high castes, and they get a cord over the shoulder. This ritual is done every year, and they have to get a certain age. They can begin studying the Vedas, which is not available generally for the low caste, um, the Dalits, and so forth. Um, Next stage, second stage would be household stage. It's sometimes called, where they get married and have children. And this all takes place within their specific caste. They don't marry outside their caste usually, and they might, in this case, have a ritual where they walk around a sacred fire as part of the marriage ceremony. Red dot on the forehead indicates being married, and that's another image that we often see associated with Hinduism. The third stage is traditionally been called the forest dweller, meaning they go out and live away from other people. In more modern times, they call it retirement or partial renunciation and withdrawal. Uh, and this is a point where you've already made your living, hopefully successfully. And if you have the means to withdraw from earning a living and devoting yourself more to meditation, prayer, and worship. But this is mainly associated with men. I don't know that I even know of a case where this is done by women. And in modern times, there may be some of that around. But primarily, historically, it's been the men doing this. And this is the stage where they're moving towards this last stage, which is the stage if they're totally devoted enough, they can achieve moksha. And so this is called the sannyasin, or which means renouncer. And this is where they do complete renunciation. They separate themselves completely from their families, from their lifestyle, and they're seeking that separation from this Maya, this illusionary world, and their emotional attachments to it and everything, to say, that they can be released from the cycle of samsara. So you, in cases, you'll see the man have the household, the man just totally might withdraw at one time, just spend more time alone in his room, and then eventually he'll just leave and seek that moksha. And generally that means they have to be alone, because they can't have anything that would take their thinking away, and they have to concentrate and slowly get released from this cycle of reincarnation. So that is the life cycle rites of passage aspect of it. So we're now going to move into some various aspects of elements of religion. Of course, you get moksha after you die. So if you've achieved it, you die. Your Atman goes to be joined into Brahman, and you cease to exist as an individual, and you reach what's called nirvana, bliss, in the sense that you're just absorbed into Brahman, unlike what heaven's depicted in Christian view of afterlife. You have funeral rites that when a person dies, and the body's bathed with water and milk and honey and coconut, and then it's burned on a funeral pyre. I was living in Uganda not too long ago, and there was a large Indian population, which Hindu followers, and they had a funeral pyre place there in town that they used for people when they died. There was in the past the practice of sati, and this was it was expected that when the husband dies, that a good faithful wife, she will, though she's still alive, she throws herself on the fire with her dead husband. And it was at times in history was expected. And if you think about it in the terms of dharma as part of your duty, that at times in history it was like that. Now it was outlawed and is currently outlawed in India, but every now and then you hear of it happening. So each goddess or god has a day of descent, or a birthday, you might call it, which they celebrate in the temple. Example would be Holi, which is celebration of Krishna, would be an example of that. There are a lot of different festivals associated with the various gods and goddesses. Here is a picture here. I think this was something to do with the sun goddess, or sun god, that was this picture was associated with. They have a lot of New Year ceremonies. And the homes are decorated with mango leaves. Women draw auspicious diagrams on the temple floor. A lot of times you see a lot of the henna tattooing is done for special occasions, marriages, festivals, and so forth. The Festival of Lights, for example, is done in autumn to honor the goddess Lakshmi, usually. And the lights were to guide the goddess to bring prosperity to and things like that. And you can imagine there's a whole lot of different types of festivals related to the different gods and goddesses. Well, just as a reminder that we looked at in the presentation on worldviews, the Hindu worldview, this world is all Maya, And so in this, the dotted line here is this universal reality, Brahman, that impersonal universal spirit. The only thing real is Brahma, and then your Atman right here, this individual / Atman, sometimes called self. And it goes through the cycle of reincarnation of samsara based on karma. Depends on where you're going to come out on that cycle after you're reincarnated. And this is what we would know as the material world, but for them, that is all illusion. Only real reality would be Brahman and Alman, like we said. And then you got these circles representing the gods. And that's the worldview. And it's quite different from what we saw in the Christian worldview, but yet there is some commonalities, that things that we could look at and between Hinduism and Christianity and say, we have some similar thoughts that we can jump off of with discussing, well, in Christianity we believe this, how is it in Hinduism? So both religions have a sense of transcendence, in the sense they're seeking something beyond themselves. Now that in Hinduism be released from samsara, for Christians it'll be in heaven with God, but they do tend to look beyond themselves. This idea of illusion, they do see illusionary satisfaction. Pleasure does not bring fulfillment, in other words, and this is a temporary thing in their thinking as well, and not where you should be putting all your thinking. So you need to look at something beyond yourself. Bhakti, the concept of bhakti, worship and devotion to a supernatural being. Now that, is a big part of Christianity. And so for Hindus, and there's a good number of Hindus that have become Christians, this is a tie-in area, a bridge where you can talk about, our devotion is to God, Jesus, and they already have that idea in mind, but they have it for multiple gods and goddesses. Another is self-knowledge, know who you are, and they do believe in that as part of their system of yoga and meditation. You're working on yourself to detach yourself from things of the world. And so that knowledge is a part. We would do the same thing as Christians to one degree. Karma, the idea of karma, we have what you'll reap what you sow. You do bad things, you can expect bad things to happen, and bad repercussions from it. And so there is a way of connecting, that, you want to do good things, but not doing those can bring about negative things, and certainly bad for your relationship with God. And so you've got that as a tie. Self-denial is a part of their view of life to improve it, and sacrifice is a part. So you've got those areas too that can be used as bridges to talk about Christianity as opposed to Hinduism, and how they're different, how they're alike, and so forth. So those might be helpful in that as we conclude this presentation on Hinduism. All right, so that was the fourth and final session on Hinduism. We will next session begin Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, and we will pick up there. So I'll bid you a good day.